All right, welcome to this explainer. Right at this very moment, there is a totally fascinating biological road trip happening inside you. So, we're going to trace the exact path of the air you breathe, and in the process, unlock the incredible mechanics of the human respiratory system. Think about it for a second. You take over 20,000 breaths a day. Literally, 20,000. And it's an entirely automatic process, right? But do you know what actually happens to that air once it crosses the threshold of your lips or your nose? How does the oxygen actually get from the atmosphere into your bloodstream? Well, let's dive into it. Here's our itinerary. We're looking at 5 steps. 1. Conditioning the air. 2. The gateway and windpipe. 3. The lung architecture. 4. The gas exchange zone. And finally, 5. Test your respiratory knowledge. To give you a quick mental map, this journey follows 5 really distinct checkpoints. We'll enter through the nose, travel down the pharynx, pass right through the trachea, expand into the lungs, and finally arrive at our microscopic destination, the alveoli. Okay, section 1, conditioning the air, the body's advanced HVAC. So your nose isn't just, an open door. It's actually a dynamic processing plant. When you inhale, the outside air is usually cold, it's dry, and it's full of dust. But the nasal chamber solves this immediately. As the air passes through, it gets moisturized, brought right up to body temperature, and filtered out. Those tiny hairs trap the dust particles, so by the time the air moves deeper into your system, it's perfectly prepped and conditioned for your super delicate internal tissues. Moving on to section 2, the gateway and windpipe, security, and transit. Now, this transit zone faces a pretty major biological design challenge. See, the pharynx is a shared highway for both the air you breathe and the food you eat. So how does your body avoid sending a piece of toast straight into your lungs? Well, the answer is the epiglottis. Every single time you swallow, this incredibly thin flap of elastin cartilage folds down over the glottis. It essentially closes the gate to your voice box and windpipe, sending food safely down to your stomach instead. It's literally the perfect security gate. Just past that security gate is the larynx, or your sound box. And sound is really just vibrating air. But check out the mechanical contrast here. In males, usually after puberty, the vocal cords become thicker and longer, with lower tension, and that creates a lower pitch. But in females, the cords are typically thin and short, operating under high tension, which naturally produces a higher pitch. Pretty cool, right? Continuing our descent, the air hits the trachea, or the windpipe. Now notice the structures wrapping around the tube. These are dorsally incomplete C-shaped rings made of hyaline cartilage. Why are they there? Well, imagine sucking really hard on a flimsy plastic straw. It just collapses, right? These cartilaginous rings act as absolutely crucial structural supports, preventing your windpipe and those initial bronchioles from collapsing under the negative pressure every single time you inhale. Section 3. The lung architecture, the airtight vault. Inside this vault, we run into a really fascinating structural dilemma. Your lungs actually don't have any muscle tissue of their own to adjust their volume. They rely entirely on the chamber around them. So to function without, tearing themselves apart, they're enclosed in a double-layered membrane called the pleura. You've got the parietal outer pleura attached to the thoracic lining and the visceral inner pleura attached to the lungs. And right between them is pleural fluid. This elegant fluid system drastically reduces friction, allowing your lungs to just glide and expand smoothly with every single breath. But wait, if the lungs have no muscles, what actually pulls the air in? Look right down at the bottom of the protective rib cage. That massive, dome-shaped skeletal muscle is the diaphragm. It forms the floor of our airtight thoracic chamber. When it flexes and moves downward, it increases the volume of the chamber, drops the pressure, and automatically vacuums air straight down into your lungs. Section 4. The gas exchange zone, the final destination. The air has traveled a really long way to reach this microscopic world. The terminal bronchioles and an alveoli, these irregular, super thin, bag-like structures that honestly resemble highly vascularized grape clusters. And this specific clustered shape, it's an absolute masterclass in biological engineering. It maximizes the surface area right there within the small space of your chest, allowing the maximum amount of oxygen to diffuse directly into your blood, all while carbon dioxide moves out. But there's one final mechanical hurdle. These alveoli are essentially tiny, wet balloons. Normally, the surface tension of water would cause them to snap shut and stick together the second you exhale. Enter nature's microscopic anti-collapse mechanism, surfactant. As you see defined here, this is a phospholipid secreted by special type 2 cells right in the alveoli. It coats the inside of the alveolar sacs, drops that surface tension, and ensures these crucial little balloons stay open and ready for your very next breath. All right, Section 5. Test your respiratory knowledge, pop quiz. We've made it through the biological road trip, so let's shift gears and see how much of this actually stuck. Here is your first question. What prevents the initial bronchioles from collapsing when there's no air inside them? Think back to the structural supports on our respiratory highway. And the answer is the presence of incomplete cartilaginous rings. Yep, those C-shaped pieces of hyaline cartilage are your body's built-in anti-collapse scaffolding. Okay, moving on to question 2. Which specific structure in the human respiratory system is responsible for conditioning the air? Think way back to the very first checkpoint on our journey. You guessed it, it's the nasal chamber. It acts as your personal, highly advanced HVAC system, filtering, warming, and moisturizing the air way before it hits your delicate inner pipes. All right, now for a highly specific anatomical question to really test your mastery of the map. At which exact level of the thoracic vertebrae does the trachea divide into the right and left primary bronchi? The correct answer is the 5th thoracic vertebra. It's right there in the mid-thoracic cavity where the main windpipe branches off to serve your 2 lungs. Definitely a major anatomical landmark to cement in your mind. And that brings us to the end of our explainer. From the advanced air conditioning in your nose, down past the cartilaginous rings, and straight into the grape-like clusters of the alveoli, your body just performed a multi-stage mechanical miracle in a fraction of a second. Seriously, if your respiratory system is this brilliantly engineered to keep you alive 20,000 times a day without you even noticing, what other invisible, microscopic miracles is your body performing right at this very moment? Thanks for hanging out with me on this explainer, and keep wondering.